Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to our webinar today, How a CDP Enhances Personalization and Drives Marketing KPIs. Quick agenda. It's about really 2 minutes for introductions. I'm not going to take too long. And then 35 to 40 minutes of actual content presentation from our wonderful presenters. We have 3 today. And then live Q&A at the end. So please stick around. We have about 10 to 15 minutes dedicated to you. You can go ahead and use the Q&A module at the top right of your browser at any time to ask any questions. Please ask throughout the webinar. We might get to them during, but definitely at the end we'll get there. And of course, we have colorful widgets at the bottom of your browser at any time for additional resources, technical support, and we also have a group chat feature. So please use that. It's a great way to kind of engage with your community. All right, just really quickly about CMS Wire. We're founded in 2003. We have a lot of editorial contributors that really keep the ball rolling. And we have 3 primary topic areas: digital customer experience, like this one, digital workplace, and information management. Really quick bonus time, it could be you. So if you stick around till the end, and bonus, if you ask a bunch of questions, we're giving away 2 $50 Amazon gift cards. So go ahead and stick with us. Today's sponsor, of course, thank you so much, Acquia, for sponsoring today. We've got a speaker from Acquia on as well. You can learn more about them at acquia.com. And a really quick intro to all the faces you see below me here. So we have Brian Carlson, founder at ROC Consulting, with us today to talk. Jonathan Weber, director of data platforms at Bounteous, and Eric Fullerton, lead evangelist, product marketing principal at Acquia. We're so happy to have them all on today. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to Brian Carlson.
Well, thanks so much, Catherine. Really excited to be here and talking to everyone. Hope everyone's having a wonderful day today. Just as a real quick introduction, my name is Brian Carlson. I'm the founder of ROC Consulting. We're a consultancy that really works with brands and help them find the sweet spot for their business at that intersection of content, technology, and marketing as it affects the digital experience for customers. So this webinar is really something that's right in my sweet spot and something I'm super excited about. So I love working with CDP vendors and really excited to talk about this. So without further ado, we're going to do a quick introduction. I'm going to talk about the market of CDP right now. A lot has changed last year, so it's really exciting to see the changes and intimidating a little bit as the world changes a lot, right? So key considerations and strategy. We're going to talk more about the Acquia CDP and then a summary at the end, and we'll do some Q&A as well. So, 2020. Right, 2020 was a unique and extraordinary year, to say the least. Due to the pandemic, massive changes happened in consumer behavior and customer behavior. And I would argue those massive changes were simply an acceleration of changes that were already underway, right, in terms of the more digital behavior of customers moving online. Obviously, the pandemic accelerated all that significantly. But businesses were really forced over the last year to accelerate their own digital transformation plans and go digital first in order to survive. So businesses that want to survive need to react to these massive changes in user behavior and digital behavior, which are happening. So as an example, this one. Within the first 3 months of the pandemic, e-commerce saw 10 years of growth in 90 days. That's according to McKinsey & Company. That is absolutely an extraordinary statistic, and I don't know in modern history if you can say that. That is extraordinary. The pandemic has accelerated the shift from physical stores to digital by 5 years. Wow. I mean, that's extraordinary. Again, it was already happening. This stuff was going on, but this has really, really changed it. 60% of customers now have higher expectations of their digital experiences than before COVID, right? So people spent the last year online, and they're not just doing business to business or business to consumer or even business to employee stuff. They're seeing these experiences that they're having online that are extraordinary with some businesses and some applications, and then they're going back and using their business apps or their consumer apps or whatever and seeing really clunky interfaces and clunky personalization and other things. So consumers are much more digitally savvy now. This acceleration in behavior has changed the way they look at things and what their expectations expectations are from brands, and they expect more, and brands really need to deliver more, right? And so, as this happened, right, so over the last year, digital interactions increased incredibly, right? So the amount of customer data related to those interactions increased exponentially. And so, as you saw these increases in data, you see increase in the volume of data. It's moving all over the place. The quality of that data, some of it's good, some of it's bad, some of it's structured, some of it's not. The speed at which it needs to move, right? It loads down all these networks. And then the variety of data across organizations. There's just data all over the place in all these different places. So, as the scale of data grows, so does the need to move it around and store it, right? And so obviously we're going to talk today about CDPs, which really are becoming foundational to data management, customer data management. So this is from the CDP Institute, which recently came out with a report for the second half of 2020, very fresh data. The second half of 2020 saw the CDP industry add 13 vendors, 800 employees, and $250 million in funding. So that is a healthy industry that is growing and still active and still growing even during this extraordinary pandemic. The CDP industry revenue is estimated to reach $1.55 billion in 2021. That's a 20% increase over 2020. So that is solid growth, even in an extraordinary year where some businesses were pulling back on investment, others were going kind of all in on digital experience. So a 20% growth last year in the second half, I think is doing extraordinarily well. 29% growth in CDP deployment in 2020 from 2019. So that shows that people are out there deploying and getting things done, right? One other stat I thought was interesting that I'll call out. This was from a recent survey from Twilio Segment that found 73% of decision makers say a customer data platform will be critical to their customer experience efforts. So people know that this is important. And that same survey found that most respondents at this phase are looking, 73% of them will use a CDP for data collection. So, at the very most basic, people want to collect data, but we're going to talk during this webinar, and our expert presenters, are going to talk about much more robust CDPs that do a lot more than just data collection. And so I think that's going to be great. And so really, regardless of all the craziness of 2020, the growth is really still strong, and the future is bright for CDPs as being a keystone technology solution in your MarTech stack, for managing, storing, and delivering customer data to affect the digital experience at scale across all touch points. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass this on and pass it over to Eric and Jonathan to talk about their presentations as well. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. And I'll kind of just give us a quick overview on Acquia, just so that we can kind of orient, and then I'll pass it over to Jonathan, who's going to lead us through the first part of this presentation. For those of you who may know us, we started with our open source origins back over a decade ago, helping large organizations build websites on Drupal, but we've really expanded into a digital experience platform. And one of the offerings in that platform is our CDP. It's one of our fastest growing solutions that exist within the platform today. And we have solutions to help marketers, but of course, traditional IT folks as well. Over 1,000 employees worldwide. But what I think is really exciting is we have over 4,000 customers across multiple different industries. And what this allows us and enables us to do is to really understand the critical and key market trends that are affecting everyone across all these industries, and then help to build the right solutions to ensure that they're able to really undergo an effective digital transformation. So with that, I'll pass it over to Jonathan, who's going to get us started and talking through some other stuff on CDP.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So hi, I'm Jonathan Weber. I'm from Bounteous. So we're a digital agency where we focus on cross-disciplinary teams with deep expertise in user experience, technology, and data, which really allows us to co-innovate with our customers to bring to life personalized digital experiences. So I'm the Senior Director of Data Platforms. I focus on solutions to enable using data as a driver of customer experience. And as part of what we do, we have a strong partnership with Acquia. Not to toot our own horn, but we were just named Acquia's Marketing Innovation Partner of the Year for 2020. And so, yeah, I want to, this slide is still part of my introduction, and I know it can be tempting to tune out until I get to a slide where I say CDP, but I actually want you to pay attention to this part because I think it's relevant to what we're going to talk about today. So at Bounteous, we focus a lot on this concept we call digital flow, which is a data-driven process for providing and personalizing customer experiences. And data is crucial to this process in two ways. First, you'll see that around the outer ring, data analysis really provides inputs for strategic decisions about how to design an experience and measures the outcome of those decisions. And then in the middle, data also plays a critical role in the moment-by-moment interactions with customers. So patterns in customer behavior shape the audiences and the segments and the user attributes we use to understand who customers are and what they want. And that ultimately becomes the engine that drives highly contextual personalization. And both of these are areas where a customer data platform can come into play to help assemble that data about customers, perform analysis or modeling or prediction, and connect with the channels where we're interacting with customers all across their experience with a brand. And so I want to begin before we go too far, I do want to just take a second to talk about what a CDP does. I think most of you are probably already familiar with the concept, but just a quick review. A CDP is meant to bring together the multiple data sources we have about customer behavior and our relationship with those customers, everything from website or app behavioral data to email to CRM to even in-store transactions. And we tend to have a rich tapestry of these kinds of data, but it's getting all of it in one place and resolving identities and joining it together in a unified customer record that can be a big challenge. And that's really the challenge that a CDP is designed to solve. Now, the purpose of assembling this customer record is twofold. For one, it enables the kinds of insights and modeling driven by data that I was just talking about. And it allows us to start thinking about holistic strategies for customer engagement that focus on the big picture, using goals around things like return on advertising spend or total revenue or customer lifetime value with a full view of the customer journey in a way that isn't possible when all of those data sources are siloed and we're only looking at one specific channel or platform at a time. The other key capability that CDPs provide is connecting those customer records to the activation channel platforms. So that's everything from digital media with targeted advertising and lookalikes and ad suppression to emails to address abandonment or offer personalized products or other offers or intervene for customers who are likely to churn, or even offline interactions like providing guidance in sales conversations or customer support. So those are sort of the components that a CDP helps us solve, is collecting all the data, bringing it together in a unified customer record, understanding it and deriving insights from it, and then using those to drive the customer experience. So I do also want to take a second to address a common point of head scratching of sort of where CDP sits in a marketing technology stack versus some other similar types of systems that also promise to consolidate data. So CDPs are really differentiated by focusing on marketing and customer experience specifically. And because of that, they also focus both on known and anonymous users. And that's in contrast with some of the other types of tools you may use that also are about customer data in various ways. A CRM, for example, that may be an important data source for a CDP, but typically a CRM only focuses on specific parts of the customer journey to support sales and sometimes customer support, but really focuses on known users. A DMP is exactly the opposite end of that spectrum. It focuses on third-party data and typically based on anonymous cookies to support advertising. And then enterprise data warehouses, they sometimes fulfill some similar role to a CDP in bringing together multiple data sources for analysis, but they're often oriented around business applications that aren't focused on customer data. They're looking at operational data or financial data, et cetera. And customer data can kind of be an afterthought that gets tacked on, especially detailed data like behavioral event streams from app and web interactions and things like that. So EDWs often aren't built to support that kind of data, and they really lack the connections to the activation tools that CDPs place a lot of focus on. Data lakes sit in a similar sort of spot here. They're more flexible than enterprise data warehouses, but again, they typically don't focus on the customer data-oriented capabilities. And so, a data warehouse or a data lake can often be an important component as sort of a landing zone for data to be ingested into a CDP, but it doesn't really take the place of a CDP. So, all of these tools, in some ways bring customer data together. But what differentiates CDP is really the focus on marketing and customer experience and, those applications of data. So, we've got a bit of background to set the stage there. What I want to do is sort of big picture, talk about what a successful CDP program in an organization looks like, and some advice for how to approach standing up and getting value out of a CDP. So I'll talk about that a bit, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Eric to talk about Acquia's CDP and some of the examples with customers who've sort of trodden this path and what they've been able to achieve in doing it. So when we talk about CDP, we typically break it down into 4 areas of activity that all work together to make it a success. First, there's strategy, of course. We've got to think about how the technology connects to business objectives, develop a roadmap that prioritizes those, drives a solution design that helps achieve them. The second area, and this is the one that I think probably gets the most focus in a lot of conversations about CDP, is the data. This is all about data collection and ingestion and creating that unified customer profile. The third area that I have here is insight. So this ranges from just simple reporting from that unified customer profile to more complex analysis and prediction through machine learning models and sort of all the ways that we can use and understand that data. And then fourth, experience. This is using those insights then to create audiences and apply them to the activation channels. So we're going to use these 4 areas to talk about building CDP maturity and some of the types of activities that go into them at different stages in an organization's progression. What you can see on the right is that the proportion of these activities change over time. So one important thing to note is that, of course, there's a lot of strategy up front, even before you choose your tools, but strategy doesn't just end there. It keeps going throughout these subsequent phases. A CDP program is one that really evolves to meet changing business challenges over time and build maturity in the way that we apply data to customers, and ongoing strategy is part of that. And then, as you can see, there's this progression from stand-up to growing and scaling your use of a CDP. And the proportion of the activities changes over time. Stand-up is heavily focused on data. And then the need for data engineering and related activities declines over time as we get all those connections set up and the data ingested into that unified customer profile. And the focus on insight and experience really grows. So I want to take a few minutes to talk us through these stages of stand-up, grow, and scale, and talk about some advice for how to approach them and some of the pitfalls or challenges you encounter along the way. So starting with stand-up. Stand-up tends to be the easiest part. Not that there can't be some technical challenges to overcome, but they're the sort of garden variety data engineering challenges that technology teams are really good at solving. So, this stage focuses a lot on inventorying and ingesting the data sources we talked about. Invariably, some of those are easy and use off-the-shelf connectors, and others are hard and involve legacy systems and things like that. But all of that proceeds as a pretty normal technology implementation project. So it's some of the other aspects that I want to focus on here. For one, the identity strategy is stitching together this unified customer profile from customer data coming from disparate systems. This is something that every tool will just sort of hand wave and say they can do, but it's something that deserves some scrutiny and thinking deeply about the data sources you're working with and the capabilities of your tool. So just joining up customer ID X and customer ID Y is not that big a deal, but consider questions like, do you need to be able to connect households and consumer data or organizations in a B2B scenario? Do you need to be able to join in-store transactions via credit card numbers? Things like that when you sort of really get into the details of how do those data sources relate to one another. If you don't think about these, they'll start to trip you up if you don't start thinking about them up front, because just getting the data assembled in one place isn't enough. We really need to unify that customer record. If just putting the data in one place was enough, data lakes would have already solved all this, right? Another area that is sort of often overlooked that I want to point out is addressing data collection in the underlying data sources to make sure you have the granularity and detail that you need to support the use cases you're beginning to articulate. So, sure, it's fine to just sort of list your website or app analytics as a data source, but does it have the right information level of detail about product interactions or promotion impressions or the channels that drive people to the experience that you need to analyze your customer data and create audiences out of it? So you really want to think not just about, where is that data, but is it all the right data? And, does it have a full enough picture, or are there additions you need to make there? And then finally, I want to point out that in the stand-up, you have to place some focus on the actual activation. It's easy to get caught up in all the data wrangling and just sort of tack on activation as an afterthought in this stage, but it's really important for momentum of the program and showing real value that you both put some thought into a phased road mapping approach at this point to prioritize some of the real business-oriented use cases, and then prioritize one or a handful of those for early on in the process. So, when we're working with a customer to stand up a CDP, we really want them to have something to show for it in the first quarter, the first 90 days or so, where they can, point to a real campaign and say, CDP enabled us to do this. Often these initial activations are in a channel like email or on-site personalization, where there's a relatively tight control over how you roll out an experiment like this, and you have control over all the data in a first-party context. Those are typically the easiest first examples to tackle, but you should really make sure that you prioritize one of those early on and get to that as part of the stand-up process. And before we go on to the next stages for growing and scaling CDP, I want to pause for a minute, because as the stand-up phase wraps up, this is unfortunately where we commonly see organizations sort of look around and say, okay, we stood it up, it's all working, we have a unified customer profile, but now what? And that's a result of not sufficiently making a plan in the stand-up phase, because it's an easy trap to fall into thinking, oh, the stand-up is just a technical process, it's all about data engineering. But that mindset puts you behind when you're ready to move forward beyond stand-up. And part of what you can think about to help guide this type of road mapping is achieving a progressively clearer vision of who a customer is and how to address them in your channels. And this is rooted in putting the data to work. The initial use cases should be ones you can support just with a straightforward use of your shiny new unified customer profile, based on your existing heuristic knowledge of your customers and who they are and what they do. But from there, the audiences are further defined and enriched by using data analysis and modeling. The end state we're looking for is a really rich, detailed picture of how to engage with individual users. But getting there is a process of progress through understanding the data, applying those insights and the experiences they can enable, and that has to get started in the stand-up phase, and then really becomes the primary focus as we move forward to grow and scale. So the next stage here, grow. In the grow phase, as I said, the focus really shifts to insights and experiences. And so this is about getting a better understanding of the overall customer journey now that you have this unified customer record, and using that to help drive your definition of audiences. This is this is in the middle of the diagram I just showed. We have some more work to do to get to really advanced modeling, but here we're creating rule-based audiences, leveraging all of that customer data. And in many cases, CDP platforms are providing a start on predictive capabilities with models like conversion propensity or re-engagement or churn, that sort of thing around general purpose use cases that we're also beginning to leverage. The sort of data engineering parts continue to be important, although much of the foundational work was already completed in stand-up, but there continue to be additional needs and use cases for data sources or destinations over time. There might be some data sources that were given less priority in stand-up that we need to come back to and add in at this stage. But this is really the phase where the program needs to fill out the roadmap with an iterative process of prioritized business objectives. The ideation and experimental design for campaigns and audiences, and then measuring the incremental impact of those and continuing to refine and add to those tactics. So this is where the team should be hitting its stride and accelerating the types of customer engagement the CDP enables. And then finally, the scale stage doubles down on the approach and really applies real-time automation where possible to the personalization moments across the customer journey. It extends not just to known prospects and customers, but to audience acquisition through channels like media and using lookalikes. This is also where machine learning and other modeling matures. Out-of-the-box models in tools are a good start, but they're not always adapted to specific business use cases. So this is where the ability to build customized models on top of your CDP's customer records and then incorporate the results back into the records for activation becomes really valuable. And ultimately, this process drives an approach to marketing and outreach and experiences that is focused on audiences and customers rather than focused on products. This is a shift in mindset for a lot of organizations. We're not just running the spring fashion line campaign, but we're running a series of always on, always personal campaigns that adapt to the needs of the business. So we're not ignoring the fact that there's a new product line out at a particular time of year, but we're really thinking about how that's a series of always-on campaigns that are designed to be sort of an intrinsic part of the user experience. So, this scale stage sort of represents the pinnacle, but I hope we've emphasized that this is not something you do all in one sort of initial project-based timeline. It's an ongoing program with a developing roadmap, and the technology is only a part of getting here.
Hey, Jonathan, I know, as you're talking about scale, and I know you're going to talk about this a little on the next slide as well in terms of staffing. One of the challenges I had working in an enterprise marketing organization and bringing on large software packages and infrastructure like this was, we could get a lot of people involved in the evaluation phase, right? And we may get a decent amount of people in commitment from the corporation as well as from staffing and resources for the stand-up phase. But that operational phase, once it's there and it needs to be run and grow and scale, and all that, it felt to me in marketing that I was just like, oh, we'll do that off the side of our desk. A lot of the initial stuff was planned more for staffing, where I felt like the operational practitioner side of it wasn't always considered as much. Can you talk to us a little bit about staffing, not just for that setup phase, but who is needed to keep this thing running and leverage it for value for their organization so that they're getting ROI for it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it also makes us think about that process, and that it's not just stand it up and then hand it over to the end users and let it run. It's really integrated teams are sort of a key to the success of a program like this. Ultimately, the business users of a CDP are the marketers who manage channels and campaigns. But as I pointed out, talking about stand-up, it's too often the focus on that initial phase can be all on the technical pieces and, just sort of getting that all stood up and then handing it over. And, it's really the marketing folks with strong support from insights and strategy that are in it for the long haul. They're the folks who are really going to be using the system and having it drive their work. And, of course, the engineers are important too. I don't want to say that they aren't. None of this is static, and they continue to be involved over time. But it's really having an integrated team approach that transforms CDP from a tool into a program that's embedded into the operations of how an organization engages with its customers. And developing and carrying forward that program is where the value really lies. And it's likely that we'll want to rethink some of the team structures we currently have in place around marketing, where, nowadays we often have teams that are organized around channels. Here's the email team, here's the paid search team. Right. And, rethinking that to something more oriented around different audience types or personas. So this is the loyalty development team. This is the new customer acquisition team. And those teams can cross channels and also incorporate analysts or data scientists or other people in support of those channels. So, it's very much about the marketing strategy that drives this, but it's a multi-role approach on an integrated team that makes it possible.
That's great. Thank you.
So that's been sort of a broad view of how we think about approaching CDP. To bring that to life, I want to turn it over to Eric to talk about how Acquia Customer Data Platform enables that and some examples of what organizations can achieve with it.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. And we kind of our kind of transition here is really focused on something very similar, which is around teams. A lot of times when you're looking at different marketing technologies to invest in, they can be very siloed within specific teams. And to Jonathan's point, and then just kind of continuing that, the objective of having, and when you're selecting a CDP, is really about optimizing the execution and of intelligence and of data across your business. It's different members of different teams, but it is that digital marketing, CRM, analytics leaders. You're going to have a lot of different people involved. But that means the tool that you do use has to have accessibility and usability for all of those individuals, as well as making sure that each of them are able to provide value in different stages and phases, from whether you're integrating or unifying data, when you're analyzing that, engaging, or optimizing that. So what I wanted to do today is I'm going to talk a little bit about the product that we actually offer, but I really want to focus at a high level. The CDP marketplace, we heard Brian talk about it. It is growing. There's a lot of complexity. There's new vendors. Almost seems like every week we have a new vendor coming out promising that they can do CDP. So some things to really keep in mind and think through that will be really critical to seeing success. There's a couple of areas that I'm going to focus on, and one of those is around providing that total 360 view of customer. The other is around democratization of your data or data sharing and accessibility. The other is around kind of making sure that you have someone who has proven scale and enterprise level scale, but also proven experience and expertise in the specific field that you're interested in. And then the one that I'm going to start with is actually talking about machine learning. And machine learning is something that everyone loves to talk about. They love to say they can provide and deliver machine learning. They do AI or whatever definition they might roll through in kind of that buzzword soup conversation. But what I want to really focus on is when you're thinking about customer data, solving some of these data management problems, there's a couple different areas you want to really think through when it comes specifically to CDP. And the objective of machine learning is to help manage some of that execution that's going to turn the data that you collect into actual legitimate insights. And that's going to help you, really accurately and more quickly segment your different users and really move forward in terms of getting, ROI and time to value much more quickly. But what this means is that you actually have to unlock machine learning across those different audiences that Jonathan and I actually just mentioned. Because a lot of times we see this very siloed within specific data science teams or maybe a larger IT team. And this is where the objective is what you really want is essentially having some out-of-the-box models, these automatic kind of clusters and recommendations, things that once you've implemented your tool and solution, you can use and see value from day one. And if you're in a complex industry, thinking like retail, for example, or maybe in CPG, insurance, all these different types of industries, you really want those models. They need to be out of the box, but also to be able to be configurable, because you don't have to want to go back to do some type of custom PS work or every time you want to make a configuration, bring in a new KPI, bring in a new rule, bring in a new metric to measure on. You don't want to have to require a development project to do that. So you need to have those out of the box models. And these really are the ones for marketers. They can use from day one, no data science expertise required. But at the same time, lots of organizations are focusing and investing in data science and machine learning. And another focus is around having kind of this open framework so that you're able to, if you are building machine learning modules or recommendations on your own, being able to bring that into a platform is equally as important as having those out-of-the-box models. So you get that value from day one, but then you're actually able to bring in your own models that you're using. So you're not kind of starting from scratch or having certain models running within your data lake and then others running within your CDP. So that's a little bit about the machine learning piece of that. And Moosejaw is a customer that we've been working with. They're kind of one of our power users, you could say, of Acquia's machine learning capabilities. And one of the things that they did was really build a kind of a customer persona grouping. So they have like their weekend warriors, they have their mountain bikers. And what they did was they adapted our machine learning off of these persona-based clusters, excuse me. So then what they did was apply likelihood models, and these are kind of these out-of-the-box likelihood models, the likelihood to buy model to these respective personas. And what's really interesting here is that they were actually able to use that likelihood to buy to actually dictate their entire discounting strategy. Rather than having to send out all of these kind of blanket discounts to everybody, they were actually able to identify which different group or persona or cluster were most likely to make a purchase without receiving a discount, and then those who would maybe only make a purchase when receiving a discount offer. And this was actually able to really improve their profit margin and really decrease their cost per acquisition. Of course, they saw good conversion rates and things like that. But what this is really machine learning come to life. Everyone loves to talk about it, but using it as a way to manage your discount strategy. So, and actually reducing the way that you're able to actually, your cost per acquisition, because you're not blanket discounting to everyone. You're actually able to understand which personas and groups are going to be likely to buy with or without discounts and vice versa. Another thing that, I think is really important here is around the concept of, I kind of combined these together. They're a little bit distinct, but it's really around scale and experience. So, having an experienced vendor, someone who's worked in this space, in the data space and the data management space for a long time, is important, but also so is having, one that has a lot of scale. So, for example, the platform that we offer, every single day, 21 billion transactions, 112 billion events, 1.4 billion machine learning predictions are processed every day. What this means is that no matter what you're dealing with, whether it be Black Friday, whether it be your most important seasonal holiday for one of our customers, Godiva, for example, that may be Valentine's Day. For others, it could be other different things. You have the scale to actually meet those requirements. And the next piece of this is really around expertise. And Acquia, we have really more retail customers. We've expanded beyond retail, but we have more retail customers than any other provider today, and really a team of retail experts to help extract that maximum value from the platform.
Hey, Eric, let me ask you a quick question here, because I think that's such an important point. You talked about some background in terms of, where the vendor comes out of and in terms of your client base, right? The applications for a CDP from a B2B perspective versus a B2C perspective versus, someone that needs to deliver omni-channel global delivery of programs and products, and they're just such different use cases. There's such different needs. There's such different cultures within legacy B2B companies versus B2C, Tell me a little bit more about, I see that expertise in retail is so critical. Tell me a little bit about, Acquia's background in the retail, how important it is to have that industry expertise to show and deliver success and ROI for customers.
Yeah, absolutely. It actually kind of gets a little bit back to what Jonathan was talking about. Is when you after you're standing up and you have this kind of model of maturity. You maybe know what you want to do with your first kind of initial use cases. Maybe you want to send out a couple specific emails or do kind of discounting or things like that. But, we were born in the retail space. The folks on the team who've actually built the platform, built it for retail. Now, what's great about that is that it can fit and meet these incredibly complex requirements in retail. But then when you start to think about the application of other industries, because it has so much flexibility and configurability, it can meet those use cases as well. But we also had this team of experts who has built out custom reporting. They've built out specific machine learning models that are very specific to some of our retail customers. And when I talk about extracting value, it's about recommending and validating specific use cases. So we've actually one of the things that I'm talking about with customer success, we've had customers on our platform for 10 years. And if you can think about the experience of working with a specific retailer and managing and understanding their data for 10 years, you've gone through such a kind of a slew of use cases and actual really practical ways that you're able to achieve value. So when it comes to recommendations for what types of campaigns are most effective, we're working with all of these different retailers to understand the different types of kind of ways that they're able to see value. So we know the campaigns that work the best. But what's also interesting is that when it comes to something like machine learning, and I was just talking about this, the configurations that we have out of the box, a lot of them are purpose-built for something like retail. So these out-of-the-box models, because we've been working with retailers for over 15 years, they're about things like average order value. Maybe we have one that's about distance to store. We have a favorite store. All these things about product seasonality, likelihood to buy. Favorite product. And then it starts to get into customer loyalty, which we're able to work a lot with because we've helped organizations build out full-fledged loyalty programs to engage those who have been loyal customers, who haven't in the past. So it's really understanding, all of those different components. And then actually, the data model is also an interesting piece of this, right? So we actually have a kind of Acquia data model, but we have a version of this that is built for retail. So we can meet and fit any industry because of the configurability of the platform. But we have one that is really specific to the way that it structures online and offline data, which is obviously really critical for use cases. But all these different kind of components all the different rules, all the different attributes are already pre-built into the platform. So once you're up and running, you're not going to have to retroactively fit the solution to meet the needs of your specific industry. That's already built and baked in. And another kind of last example that I'll go through around this is this COVID dashboard that we built out. You spoke about the challenges around COVID for retailers, how it accelerated things, both in terms of digital transformation, but then, beyond that, really trying to figure out what they're going to, how they're going to move from their in-store strategy to their omni-channel strategy. We actually were able to work with about 15 of our different customers to provide these out-of-the-box reports, 40 unique reports. They're all about the business impact of COVID-19. So the shift from in-store buyers to omni-channel shoppers, individuals who had never purchased online before, they were able to target them with specific offers, understanding and mapping down into store reopenings by different geography, the kind of impact of just their overall bottom line. So working with them and providing that level of expertise is helpful in two ways. One, if you're a retailer, there's no better CDP to work with. But two, this kind of customizability and flexibility to meet all these different requirements, because we work with retail, we can fit and meet really the requirements for any industry, because we started with arguably the most complex one out there. So as we're starting to see more interest in insurance, manufacturing, healthcare, EDU around CDP, that configurability really comes in handy, and then that expertise is kind of built out from there. Now, I was just talking about Godiva, and this is a really good example of how they were able to use and work with the tools and capabilities within the CDP. So it's a really interesting story. There's a lot to it, but I think one of the things that struck me the most is we were actually just talking with their CMO, and they had actually just rolled out their store reopening plan for, how they were going to overlay different data sources, and they were creating campaigns to geo-target to help get shoppers back in store in specific states where stores were reopened, even based down to something specific like health codes. So there's this really specific, interesting use case. And what she said was that going with a vendor who is able to meet not just those kind of stand-up or intermediate use cases like we were talking about earlier, but into those grow use cases. That's why I went with this solution, because I knew that, essentially it was my job was on the line, and I knew that it wasn't about what we did in 6 months. It was going to be about the value that we were able to provide over the course of a year and beyond. Because some customers have been working with them for 10, 11 years. And, implementation time is a tricky thing, but being able to do and get time to value once you're implemented is really, really critical and important. So the next one is that I'll talk through, and I'm going to have to move somewhat quickly here just so we can get through all of our content and get to some questions, is around kind of this total 360 customer view. That's what we provide. This is really the best way to understand who are your most important segments and who your respective customers are.
Hey, one thing I was just going to ask real quick, Eric. I hear this a lot. I am involved as an analyst and consultant in a lot of different CDP packages. And, the words 360 customer view, single view of the customer, I hear attached and honestly to almost every single package, especially a CDP package, right? Yeah. Not all, so it can't all be the same, right? Some CDPs are going to be more robust than others. Tell me a little bit about where the hype is in that, and why you guys are delivering more around a more cohesive 360 view. And is that term being overused? Do you feel like you guys are embracing it, I guess?
Yeah, we've kind of tried to go with total 360, so it's slightly different. But every single CDP vendor is going to tell you that they provide a single customer view. But what's really interesting, and this is where, when we're actually thinking about what type of solution to invest in for the people that are listening and on the line, this is where you really want to hold folks' feet to the fire. Because just saying you can provide a single customer view doesn't actually mean you can provide a single customer view. So what I wanted to do for this section is actually highlight all of the different aspects and components of what providing that view would look like. So one common thing we see is identity resolution engines. And not being able to resolve identities, but actually having a tried and true and tested identity resolution engine. That's something that is critical for kind of the top tier with the ways we're stitching and deduping data. If they're not saying they have one of those IRE engines, they're likely saying, oh, we can cleanse and stitch. It's likely very manual, and maybe we'll have some challenges specifically around being able to access this data and bring this data in real time. There are lots of different components to this. I mean, if I had an hour, I could probably talk to each of them in detail. But there's a couple different things that I think are important, like being able to do probabilistic or fuzzy matching. So, we talk about having data lakes and having all these different sources of data coming in. But how are you able to match if someone maybe has a first name that's spelled one way, and then, maybe they have kind of their full first name in another one? Or maybe they have an address that's different in one place, and then they kind of actually have another account where their address is different there. Or, maybe they have changed their maiden name or something like that. Maybe, they were anonymous one time and they were not the next time they logged in. How do you actually map and match these profiles together? And then when we start to think about organizations, maybe they have multiple brands. This is where stuff like being able to reconcile an individual profile across brands is really important. So you're able to look at one individual. You're able to look at what they're doing across multiple different brands that sit under your umbrella, but then also within one. So you can do the right type of cross-brand offer. Maybe you can actually identify and see that they really have only invested and purchased with one specific brand in your portfolio, and those are the most compelling offers to send them. And then we start to think about things like householding. Lots of times organizations are still doing direct mailers, and it is super expensive. Rather than, what if you could just identify, we actually did this with one of our customers, just identify if they sent it to the head of household or the primary buyer for a specific household, being able to identify that. And they were able to, that would have been a cost reduction of over 50% for that entire direct mail offer that they were going to put out. So it's having that type of knowledge, but then householding goes beyond that, right? So if you're sending the right, someone may have I can go into hundreds of different use cases. I know that we're at time, so I'm going to actually move into the next section of this and actually show you, because Lululemon is a great example of being able to do all these different things. But to your point, a single customer view is a nice word, but it is actually, the devil is really in the details and all the features and components of what would provide and deliver that view. And that's where we think, the total 360 or, the nomenclature isn't as important as the details of how you would achieve that are. So I'm going to go in quickly and talk a little bit about Lululemon, because this is just a good example of this. And obviously, Lululemon has a massive amount of stores, and they also have a lot of activity that takes place on their .com. And for them, the number one thing was, how do we, they had data sources. They had multiple different data sources. They had, I think, 7 or 8 different data types that they were ingesting in, and they were able to use the retail data model that we have to kind of bring this all into one specific view. So what they started with was 68 million customer records. So they had 68 million. So every time they sent out an offer or sent out a discount or sent out a communication, whether it be an SMS or an email, they were sending it out 68 times, 68 million times to each of these individuals when they would do blanket communications. What we were able to do with this total 360 view is get that down to 18 million records. So 1/3 of the amount of records were actually legitimate records, and 2/3 of them were duplicates. So if you can think about just the potential cost savings associated with that, but then also having that insight, the right communications to the right people, and they saw really dramatic increases in their baseline revenue, because they were able to generate the right communications, right topics. They do a ton of work with omni-channel shoppers. Then when COVID-19 hit, they were actually able to deliver a specific message to the people who had never purchased anything online before, compelling them to make that first purchase. But they didn't have to deliver that to the online. So they were able to optimize their spend, but also and increase their kind of like cost per acquisition there, not having to reach out to their most loyal and kind of engaged digital-only shoppers with a very compelling 30% off offer, and only give that to the people who had never purchased online. The last thing that I think is really important, and we went through machine learning, we talked about Total 360, is around data democratization. This could be around data sharing, and really around giving the teams that are across the organization that Jonathan talked about, and I mentioned as well, the access they need to this consistent and accurate data.
Yeah. Hey, Eric, let me just ask real quick, and I know we got to go quick because we're going to do Q&A, and I think we got a lot of good questions too. But this for me, I worked in enterprise marketing, and this had to be one of the most frustrating things for me. Like, we were still running manual reports. in our department. Literally, we would generate manual reports. They'd come out on Fridays for the executive team. By the time we would get the data, we couldn't do anything with it as practitioners. It would be like trending data. You know, oh, well, that's interesting, but we can't do anything with it. This was an issue for years and years. I mean, so when you're saying to me data democratization, that tells me that practitioners who need the data when they need it to make actionable decisions are getting it when they need it. You know, this was frustrating as heck for me in marketing. I mean, tell me a little bit more about it. So I really like the term data democratization. Tell me more about what you mean by that.
So like you said, it is incredibly painful. You know, I have a marketer past myself, and you know, when we're trying to get reports, we're sometimes sending them out to an IT or data team, and they're actually doing some custom BI stuff that sits on top of a data lake. And it's not their first priority always. So sometimes it would be 1 to 2 weeks later. And you can't do real-time marketing and real-time offers with data that's 2 weeks old. It just doesn't work. But the other aspect of data democratization is being able to, you know, not only have all these analytics available, but also have them available outside of the UI or the tool itself. And this is what gets really interesting is, you know, we have one of our customers who actually has their CEO. They don't log in to the actual tool, the Acquia CDP tool, but because we have this profile API that's actually able to shoot out the most up-to-date critical reports that they've identified and share that to him every single day that he wants to look at it. So it's not only just having the right tools and capabilities and reports within the tool, but actually enabling folks across the organization to view those reports and view those analytics in the manner that they normally would on their day-to-day. And this also provides that single version of truth for all teams. I mean, because of the accuracy of our data and the shareability of that data, I mean, we have organizations like they're actually using this data and this information to report to their board. They're actually mapping their marketing KPIs against it for bonus payments. We actually have customers who are using this for reporting to the street. And they're able to have that and share that access of data information, and it's super critical. And you know, being able to do that direct query access is really important, so that these technical teams are able to access it instantly, and then your marketers kind of have these type of dashboards and emailed reports as well. And this is something that, you know, it's helpful with campaign reporting. It's helpful with customer acquisition, understanding customer journeys, the actual conversion point within that. And just in the interest of trying to have to move on, you know, a great example of this is one of our customers, Wix. They have a lot of activity in their call center. And previously, they would pick up the phone and they would have maybe what was in the call center like database and look that up. But when they implemented our CDP, they were actually able to look at an individual single customer profile and that view, that total 360 view of the customer. And then they were actually able to see what their latest transaction was, what their latest purchase was, what their latest interaction was, what their latest maybe complaint was, or time they called the call center. They were able to see what their entire household looked like. They were able to get so much information. They were able to drastically increase the efficiency of those call center interactions. But then just from a pure efficiency point, their list pulls, the time to actually pull lists went from 2 weeks to 10 minutes. I mean, this is like that efficiency play. And when we talk about CDP, we love to talk about ROI. We love ROI, but efficiency is another really critical important here. And then being able to execute campaigns. It used to take 3 weeks to execute a Facebook campaign to get all the different reports and analytics and metrics together. Mm-hmm. And then after this, having that single source of truth, having that accurate view, but then being able to share that across the organization, to democratize that data, went from 3 weeks to 30 minutes. And I'm going to flash this up really quickly before I close, because, and I'm happy to share this, but this is the operational efficiency value when you bring in components of the CDP. This is actually what data democratization really means. It's shortening the time to execute specific campaigns, but then also making things possible, like customer service being able to see details of a profile that were not possible before. And I won't speak too much to the ROI other than that, you know, it is about ROI. It is also about operational efficiency, but I think I covered that with the customer stories as well. If you want, we can start to source some of the questions. I just wanted to show and talk about Acquia, our DXP. I'm going to do this in 30 seconds, even though it could probably take me 30 minutes. So our customer data platform sits within our marketing cloud, but it's really part of our holistic digital experience platform. The way we've organized this, these almost look like they're separate things, but they are not. They are very interconnected. There's integrations that exist across the different clouds that we offer. But the way you want to think about it, and that helps me to think about it, is when you're with our Drupal cloud, it's really the creation of content that can exist on any channel. Oftentimes it starts with website, but being able to push that content out. And then what our marketing cloud does is take that content, take the interaction that takes place, and help optimize that experience so that optimal content, personalized content, data content that is, a strategy that is data driven is able to continue to roll out. It's almost like a circular back and forth between the two. But this is our entire holistic platform. We can service marketing and IT organizations, but our customer data platform is the center piece of our entire marketing cloud and how we engage with different, and how we engage and optimize the experience for customers. We're seeing tons of growth. It's a super exciting space. And fortunately, we have lots of successful customers who are able to implement some of these strategies that we talked through and see some real value that I shared today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that, everyone. That was a lot of great information. We're going to launch right into the Q&A. So just so you know, there's our Twitter handles if you want to engage with us, and please continue to ask questions. If we don't get them to them today, we will follow up. We'll talk with our speakers and we'll make sure that you get heard. First one, I believe, and please forgive me if I'm butchering your name, Madhumita, with third-party cookie demise, will CDP investment be a better decision? How does this impact CDP value proposition over a CRM or EDW if no third-party cookies are accessible or available? Who would like to take this one? Shall we go with maybe Eric, since you were in the hot seat? We'll just kind of carry right along to you if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, so we've actually been thinking through this and talking about this a lot. And, the alarm has kind of been sounded by the demise or death of third-party cookies. It is a requirement to get your first-party data strategy correct, because those workarounds around third-party cookies and maybe trying to use some type of DMP or MSP solution, a personalized experience based on the data you collect, it's just not going to work the same way anymore. And that's part of the reason. If you see those metrics that Brian talked about earlier, like that is one of the biggest reasons that whether they'd be talking to industry leaders and analysts, or whether they kind of just sharing what their areas of focus are, first-party data management, being able to optimize that data, focus on CDP and customer data platforms is continuing to skyrocket. You saw the implementation numbers. The answer to your question in a short way is absolutely yes. I know we have other questions, but there's a lot of detail. We actually have a lot of content coming out about the cookieless world and the shift to first-party data and the importance of really mapping and getting that strategy right, because pretty soon you're not going to have an option to not have a good first-party data strategy in place.
Great.
And I would also just quickly add to that having all of that first-party data and in living in a world where compliance and privacy are a big deal, a CDP can really be sort of a key component to understanding where all that data lives and how you need to respond, when someone requests their personal data or that it be deleted.
I think that's such a great, I wanted to make almost the exact same point, which is like CDPs can be that central solution for managing customer data, give you that ability to start to address compliance issues and stuff. So it actually can be that solution that's going to help you manage compliance across the globe. So
yeah, we could speak about this at length, but I will just echo that. And that's one of the value areas, being able to